All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Theory Underground. I'm your host, Dave McKerracher, and today we have a very special event for you all. We are in Bloomfield, Ontario, an hour outside of Kingston, where we drove in from this morning, and we are at the McLuhan Institute in the flesh, for real, and it's really exciting to be here. To have met Andrew now. We've known each other for years, or at least we've known each other online. And now we're here. And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to open it up with Andrew sort of introducing us all online and in person to this space, and kind of talking a little bit about it, historicizing it maybe perhaps. But then he'll be basically introducing us, and then we will all give our presentations, and then it'll come back to him, and then he's going to kind of reflect on all of that, and then we'll do a Q&A, and it'll all be over within an hour and a half easily. If we are having too much fun, it could go as long as 2 hours, but it won't go longer than that. And then we're all going to we'll close out on the Zoom side, we'll close out from the actual event, and then for the people who are here in person, he's going to actually give us a little tour of the archive. And so for the seeing impaired in the audience, just know that we are in this. If you like the smell of books, if you like libraries that don't just throw away old books and replace them with random newsstand trash, then you would love this space because it, first of all, smells like books. Second of all, it has lots of old books, and there's a lot of McLuhan ones. So we're really excited for that tour as well. But I guess that's all I'll say for now. Please put your hands together for Andrew McLuhan.
Are we gonna? Yeah.
This will be like the speaker spot.
Speaker spot.
Cool.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to welcome you guys to the McLuhan Institute. This is a big deal for me, because this is the first actual event I've hosted here, that's ever been hosted here. What was previously hosted here was sheep, or maybe pigs. We're not entirely sure, but this is a former pig or sheep barn, which my dad converted to be his library back in 2005. And after he passed away in 2018, and after we bought the place for my mom in 2020, it's been mine. And I started the McLuhan Institute, and here we all are. So this is very exciting. It's exciting to do this, to see people in the flesh that you look just like you're online. It's incredible. It's remarkable.
That's what I thought about you. I was like, what?
Really? Wow.
You actually look the way you do on the internet.
It's something that provides constant amusement and irritation. That we have a local paper here, and there's somebody who writes in the local paper, and she does a weekly, Times Gone Past article, and the picture of her is gotta be 60 years old. I'm not even exaggerating. It's of her 20-year-old self, and she's gotta be like 80 now, and so she does not look anything like her brother. It's a little disconcerting. But so here we are. Welcome. I'm really excited to host this event, Theory Underground, which I'll have more to say, and I'm going to wave the book at you that I left over there. But we're here because this book was put out, a compilation of various modern thinkers, including, I was asked if I would contribute a piece. However, I didn't have time to get one done, but I managed to convince my uncle to let us put one of Marshall's pieces in there. And it's a piece that Marshall wrote kind of in response to Lewis Mumford, who, I've yet to track down what precisely Marshall was responding to, but apparently Lewis Mumford didn't care for Marshall bringing him up in some of his work, and must have written something which Marshall then responded to in a really, in a kind of glorious way, I think. But So that's ostensibly why we're here. We have Anne and David who have contributed to the book, and they're gonna say a few things. We have an audience member in the flesh, including the thousands of people who are tuning in from around the world right now. But just the same, I think it's going to be fun, and I'm very much looking forward to it. After they're done, I'm going to say a few words, and as you can see here, I have a very extensive list of comments to read. So without further ado, who's going first?
Dave.
Dave.
Cool. Yeah.
I'll let you introduce yourself because I really.
All right.
There we go.
If you were to introduce me, it'd be like, you just go off and like, well, I remember this one Facebook post. It was very memorable.
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? And so, I guess, I should have introduced myself. So I am the founder of Theory Underground. Theory Underground is a critical media theory experiment. Right, that's what it is, and my new book Timenergy just came out because Theory Underground is also a publishing house. It's a course site platform. It's a way that people who are in dialogue with me or co-instructing courses with me or who are students at Theory Underground are able to develop their thoughts, blog their thoughts on the platform, and then those can make it into future volumes if they are something that fits into it. And so, in a sort of sense, when I say it's an experiment in critical media theory, what I mean is that it is based out of this tradition that was founded by Marshall McLuhan. But that the critical part is that, critical theory idea, right? Critique of power in institutions that goes back to the time of Marx, but it goes through the Frankfurt School. People such as Michel Foucault can be considered critical theorists depending on who you are. But, if you take a course in critical theory, then they will typically teach, basically from Marx through Foucault. You'll get the Frankfurt School guys along the way. Derrida will be in there as well. But what is all of that, and how does it actually relate to media theory? These are kind of the ideas that I want to touch on in a sort of introductory way. And I don't want to go too in depth, and I kind of want to keep it relatively brief. And this to be more of not just an introduction for you all, but to kind of give you a sense for some of the, what I would say are essential threads that I'm kind of holding on to. And that I aim to continue researching through the work that I'm doing with Theory Underground. So the last thing I'll say about the experiment at Theory Underground is that it's an experiment in the medium itself. The goal is to create a new kind of medium, one that could potentially be inspirational for and useful to independent academics. And of course, there's no such thing as a strict independence. We'll never be independent. And there is no such thing as a thinker independent of others. Every thinker requires interlocutors for the dialogue. Every thinker throughout history has required patronage of some sort because they obviously were not doing manual labor. So what do I mean by independent? I just mean independent of institutions. And it's not because institutions are bad, but it is because a lot of us, our prospects, when we're thinking about what kind of a world we're going into, what kind of a future we're making for ourselves, like what are we actually doing as thinkers, it doesn't look so good for some of us in the institutional matrix that currently exists. And I think it's becoming that way for more and more people. And a good example of that is the fact that you have people who go into some kind of a non-profit-oriented field, such as philosophy or poetry, the humanities in general. They go into it not for money, but because they love the field itself and they want to be able to be immersed in it. And the reason that you get to take those kind of classes as an elective along the way to your MBA or, your law track, whatever it is that you're doing, the reason is because we've always, I don't know, for a couple of thousand years, had this idea that the children of the elite somehow benefit from spending time with people like us, people who are just passionate about the humanities and who do it because we honestly want to do this more than anything else. My cat's meowing a lot. I gotta check.
Yeah.
He's good. He's just...
Why is he meowing though?
Why is, yeah.
Let's take his harness off.
Yeah.
He doesn't need it right now. I think his harness got twisted and he's just being
He's
weird.
just like, get it off me.
This is Ryan Gosling, everybody. Not the actor, obviously, but the cat. The,
Case wasn't clear.
retroactively, Ryan Gosling, the actor, will always be compared to the cat because...
Has anyone ever seen the two of them in the same room, though?
Has anybody ever seen the two of them in the same room, though? Asks Anne. No.
Shouldn't it be Ryan Catling?
Ryan Catling, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gosling is a baby goose.
So what's this thread I was just carrying? The idea that you go into this field because you love it, and there has always been this idea that there's a privilege that comes from getting to spend time with someone who's just passionate about something that's not fully instrumentalized towards a profit or power motive. That there is a value in itself in that experience. But the problem is, for many of us, when we look, we see, oh, look at this poetry professor, look at this philosophy professor, look at this history professor teaching the same class several times per week for years and years and years, right? I know one person who teaches 6 English classes in the same day. That is the definition of soul-sucking. That is the definition of, what it seems like is the industrialization of
That's exactly what it is.
of the humanities. And so the humanities are supposed to be the one field that is not instrumentalized. And here you have it being more instrumentalized than ever. And of course, you still have wonderful experiences with teachers and professors, and we all do, or we would have never discovered the life of the mind. Because obviously that doesn't just fall out of the sky. We owe this to people we met along the way. But those people we met along the way are usually in between a rock and a hard spot. And so there are various experiments in leaving the institutions. And most of them turn to doing everything off of YouTube or doing everything through a podcast. And I do think that there's something of value to creating spaces that are dedicated to texts where we meet not just on demand whenever we want to, but routinely for some stretch of time that we're all committed to, so that it's not just me thinking about this thing when I want to, but I also am kind of plugged into a community of other people who are doing so, and maybe I have someone else to do that with. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about the McLuhan Institute and what Andrew is doing here is that he's doing that. He's doing his own experiments with that. But my experiment with Theory Underground, it comes down to taking what I see to be some of the most negative tendencies of the attention economy and trying to either counter them for my own sake or for others' sakes, or harness them. And so countering tendencies versus harnessing tendencies is something that I think about, right? So it's like if harnessing a tendency, for instance, might look like, well, everything's gamified. I am driven by the gamification of Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is. Like, I want to get likes, I want to get follows, right? Is there a way to, instead of just countering that with, like, say, getting rid of your phone or something, is there a way to harness that to kind of say, oh, I already have this weird subjective formation within myself that makes me need this thing. Is there a way that I can hack that? And so an example off the top of my head is that we've experimented with, at Theory Underground, the idea of the exegetical readings and time-lapse readings. So an exegetical reading is when you read something out loud and talk about it. And we have a rule where you're supposed to read 70% of the time, talk about it 30% of the time, on average, so that it doesn't just become, oh, we're just talking again, like, podcasts usually do. But instead, no, we're doing something different here. We're letting the text speak for itself a lot more before we try to contextualize it or problematize it or put it in our own words, which is the main point of an exegetical reading. working with various interpretive approaches and reading a text like that, though, doesn't work on the first reading, right? It works on the preferably second or third reading. Like, you want to have digested. You want to have gotten the lay of the land in the text. You don't just open a book and start reading something you've never read before and then stop every time you have a thought pop into your head and then you comment on that, because that is already YouTube. That is already Twitch. That is already what streamers do. They play a YouTube video that they've never seen before and they pause it every time they have a thought. Usually it's some kind of a cheap gotcha. And it doesn't make them better. And when I was doing Twitch or when I was doing YouTube full time, it didn't make me better. I was hoping that this would, in a sort of sense, make me better. But what I was finding is that not only does the medium change the message, or actually render the message irrelevant, but the medium was also changing the messenger, me. I felt like I was becoming Twitchified as a Twitch streamer. For those who don't know, you've probably seen live streamers on YouTube or something, but if you've not actually been on Twitch, it's a little bit different because you can't go back to the beginning of the live stream. It's just you come in on the middle of something and then you got to figure it out and you're just there in that space. Which means that the streamer who's doing Twitch streaming is constantly assuming an audience of people who've just tuned in, which means that they can never really get anywhere. Right? Like they always kind of have to stay at base camp, to use the metaphor Peter Sloterdijk develops in You Must Change Your Life. He uses this metaphor of people at the base camp and then people who are climbing the mountain. And of course, like, your family and friends support you from the base camp as you go and you climb the mountain. And then they cheer for you, or they can come help you or something like that. And he says, we live in a society today where there's a lot of people who just want to have a comfortable base camp and they don't want to achieve things. They don't want to pursue excellence, right? Well, mastery, right. Twitch and becoming Twitchified, it felt like, oh, what I'm here to do is to create a comfortable base camp for people. It's not so that they learn how to read for themselves, that they learn how to interpret for themselves, that they learn how to write or learn different languages, or that they become literate across the fields of philosophy, the humanities, and social sciences. No, we find our favorite thinker, hook our wagon to them, and then go in circles at base camp forever, right? And I felt like that was what was happening to me. I felt like that's what I was enabling in my audience, and I did not like that, and I wanted to do something different. And so Theory Underground counters that in a variety of ways. And we can get into those more later, and people can always ask me more questions about those things. But for now, I just want to say a few things about media theory and critique. And so first, I want to say that my entry into everything was through philosophy and political philosophy specifically. I was mainly just interested in philosophy, and I was kind of I would say sort of a utopian, hippie socialist of a sort. You know, I didn't really have it. I don't know. I saw Occupy from afar and thought that looks cool, but I didn't really participate. But it did get me thinking, and it got me thinking maybe I want to look more into these things. And so when I started studying philosophy as a non-traditional student, I'd spent a decade in the workforce. I start going to college, and I'm finding out about philosophy. I discovered that there's this thing called philosophy of technology. And so I started looking into philosophy of technology. And I was confused because, you know, I loved Heidegger's The Question Concerning Technology. I thought that was a deep and profound sort of perspective on the situation that I'd never really thought about. Not just that he doesn't just look at kinds of technology and the different effects that different technologies have on us or the world or the mediation between us, but he was also interested in the sort of general tendency of the mode of revealing that we take on when we live in a fully technologized society. And so what I mean by that is, like, a mode of revealing is to say, like, you could be a poet writing about, oh, you know, the beauty of the tree with the dew on its leaves and the wind in its branches or something. I'm obviously not a poet.
That was beautiful, dude.
Thank you. Oh, that's good. But you take a relation to the thing or the tree in a way that is not purely instrumentalized. You're not thinking about its market value. You're not thinking about its cellulose or its reduction to cellulose on the market. Heidegger's point is that it doesn't matter. At a certain level, the phone you're using, the writing pad you're using, the food you're ordering, the coffee you're drinking, all of it is challenging forth nature as a standing reserve that is on call to satisfy your desires. And so here you are, like, part of what it's functioning now to do, all of these different things that you're using to write and think, it's helping you be like, well, I'm special because I'm not part of that system of expropriation. Or if I am, it's accidental, but no, I'm poeticizing being, right? Well, the point is like, yeah, but the default mode of revealing that we are all in is still the reduction of all of these things to their market value, to their basis as material resources. And then, of course, there's like the hinge point in that essay where he says that at that moment when we find ourselves masters and possessors of nature, which was the term that René Descartes had used in his discourse on method. Like, that's the goal, is that, through unleashing science, we'll be able to become the masters and possessors of nature. At that very point, we discover, kind of behind our backs, so to speak, we've become reduced to human resources, put on call for a world system of expropriation and exploitation, right? Which is like, he's not a Marxist, but this is kind of getting at something that obviously Marxists are interested in as well. Well, I was blown away by the question concerning technology, and so I wanted to get more into philosophy of technology. And what I discovered was that amazing professors like Don Ide or Andrew Feenberg are they're great professors. They write important works that get published in important journals, but it doesn't feel like it's there for me. Like, what's missing? I was like confused. What is missing? And I'll just use an example with each of them. With Don Ide, he's basically like, he's got like this sort of Marcuse-based perspective on the situation. And to say it's Marcuse-based is to say it's Freudian, Marxist, Heideggerian. Some kind of a fusion of those things. I have my questions about that fusion. I don't think it's my preferred synthesis of those thinkers, but I think Marcuse is interesting for taking that on. And Feenberg had studied under him. And what he says is that the solution is democracy. So just put some more democracy on it. Like, the real problem with technology today is that it's runaway capitalism. And so what we just need is a stronger managerial state that is going to rein it in, so to speak. And of course, democracy, I like the idea of the consent of the governed being represented in the decisions that get made. I like the idea of, or the will of the governed. I love these ideas, but functionally the way that democracy tends to work, it kind of makes me feel despair because I don't see any real hope in it. When I think, like, I'm sorry, I don't look at Congress and think, yeah, these are a bunch of people who are going to be able to make some decisions to really rein in the technological developments that are running amok, right? First of all, they're all already bought out by the very corporations that are benefiting from turning children into neurotic, anxious, depressed, hyper-distracted, what's the word? Yeah, neurotics. I don't know. I'm just repeating myself. But you know what the situation is because you feel it being done to yourself as well. And so the fact that that's being done to children and it's being done for profit without any real thought going towards, oh, how's this going to backfire? That's troublesome, right? I don't think democracy or the currently existing political situation is necessarily going to be helpful in this regard. And so I go to someone like Don Ide, and what do I find here? I find that he is a systematizer. He likes to classify things, right? He likes to classify different kinds of technology. He says Heidegger just talks about technology like it's one thing. But actually there's different kinds of technology and they have different kinds of functions. And so that's kind of what he does. And I think it's interesting, but I'm like, well, where's the real thing that I'm looking for here? And all of it kind of brought me to Marshall McLuhan way too late. Right? Way too late. Way too late for all the conferences that I went to that were related to philosophy of technology, that's for sure. And what McLuhan does is he's not just focused on the technologies that we make, and he's not just interested in what those help us do on the world. He's interested in how they mediate our relationship with ourselves, one another, and the world. And when we say mediate, media mediates, it is to say that we do not have direct access to the things themselves. Outside of any question about transcendental subjectivity and whether the categories of our mind are able to get to the things themselves or not, the Kantian problems of philosophy. No, there's just the fundamental thing, which is that I go about my day usually thinking about the things that are not immediately present to me, and those things were represented to me, mediated through devices, and these different devices and the different ways that they mediate this stuff, it changes how I see the world, how I see myself, how I think, how I act, how I interpret, how I perceive. And so that seems pretty important. That seems like probably one of the most fundamental fields of the humanities that should be a prerequisite to any meddling in science or nature. But instead it's just marginalized off into a random town in Canada. Right? And so I have a little thing that I'd like to read that I wrote for the Marshall McLuhan biography at the end, bio, not biography, bio, at the end of Underground Theory, the volume that we just published on the 2nd of September, 2023. It says, Marshall McLuhan, July 21st, 1911 to December 31st, 1980, was a Canadian philosopher whose work is among the cornerstones of the study of media theory. McLuhan coined the expression, the medium is the message, in the first chapter in his Understanding Media, the Extensions of Man and the Term Global Village. He predicted the World Wide Web almost 30 years before it was invented. He was a fixture in media discourse in the late 1960s, though his influence began to wane in the early 1970s. In the years following his death, he continued to be a controversial figure in academic circles. However, with the arrival of the Internet and the World Wide Web, interest was renewed in his work and perspectives, especially in one very niche corner of the Internet, on an obscure but innovative platform called Theory Underground, where a small cohort of underground researchers study critical media theory, CMT. In this circle, McLuhan is treated like Gandhi or Socrates or something. Though some of the CMT cohort has certain disagreements with this or that idea, they all agree that we are, more or less, living in a world that cannot be understood without Marshall's work. All of this author bio was taken from the Wikipedia page, except for the part about Theory Underground and the CMT cohort, which was written by David McKerracher, one of the cohort's instructors. Huge thanks to Michael McLuhan for getting us an unpublished letter from the McLuhan archive, and a huge thanks as well to Andrew McLuhan for visiting our cohort and doing the important work that he does to keep the work of his father, Eric, and grandfather, Marshall, alive in the 21st century. And so really I just copied the Wikipedia, pasted it, deleted like a couple of random sentences, and then I just, inserted ourselves there at the end of it, because from where I stand, when I look at TheoryTube, I don't see the McLuhan people. And the thing is, we're not McLuhan Knights in the sense that it's like, well, I read Marx and Heidegger and Nietzsche and Aristotle and Plato. I learned from them. I consider them to be masters in a sort of way. Like, my ideal heaven would be eternity, getting to have conversations with these people. You know what I mean? And McLuhan's one of them. And for Michael Downs, who's also here in the chat, McLuhan is one of them. And instead, he's treated like a fad that went away in the 1970s, as you see in that article. You can tell that article was written by a hipster. All that person cared about was his popularity. It was big then, and then it waned, and then it became controversial. Well, that tells us nothing. It tells us nothing of his work. And what I'll say is that in the world of media theory, he is the Sigmund Freud. In the world of media theory, he is the Karl Marx. He is the Darwin, right? Like this is something we take very seriously, and we'll go to bat for it. We're coming to a city near you. If you want to fight us on this, bring it on. But no. Anyway, so what does the critique bring? For me, the most important thing is that the mediums, pluralize it. I know I'm not supposed to say mediums. I'm supposed to say media, but everyone associates that with the media, which is Chomsky's domain or whatever. I say mediums, just to be clear what I mean. Working class people get it. And so anyway, the idea is that mediums do not exist in a void, right? They do not just come down from the sky or grow off of trees. They come out of our interfacing with technologies that do not just come out of nowhere, but usually come about because of either the interests of power or profit or both, because those two things often go together. And so then the question is, what can the world of critical theory offer to media theory? And then the other question is vice versa. What can the world of media theory give critical theory? And I think there is this thread of a sort of maybe this hint of somewhere, a starting point, if you will, in the Understanding Media, which was Marshall's his most popular work, right? It's sort of his magnum opus. And that is his engagement with Marx. Marshall believes that where Marxists get it wrong is that they think that base determines superstructure. And so what is base and superstructure? Base is the productive relations and the means of production in society. That is how things are made, how things get from point A to point B, the kinds of stuff we have to go and do with our toil on a daily basis to make the world go round. The productive base of society determines the parameters within which all of the cultural stuff unfolds. And so the cultural stuff is being called superstructure, which is to say, like, it's operating within those parameters established by the base. Marshall says multiple times, and of course, if you do a word search for Marx, he says the name Marx like 7 times, and I think 4 of those times are dealing with the Marx brothers. So I'm overstating my case.
Not coincidentally.
It's not coincidentally. I'm overstating my case to say, like, this is the point of Understanding Media. I'm not saying that is what he was thinking. But there is this opportunity for a dialogue between critical theory and Understanding Media, because I do believe that this idea of the power of the superstructure being underestimated by Marx and Marxists is something that is thought about by others as well. Gramsci, Althusser, Lukács, to name a few. Now, of course, they don't lose the importance of the base, but because they're surrounded by dogmatic worldview Marxists who think in a very simplistic way, oh, it's all base, superstructure, not important at all. Because they are dealing with people like that, they kind of have to go, okay, guys, you're not thinking very dialectically about this. Obviously, there's a dialectical sort of back and forth between base and superstructure. But to try to correct that within Marxism, which as a tradition has really doubled down on the side of base and thinking of things in such a way, I don't think is enough. I think you actually need a radical outsider from that discourse. And McLuhan was absolutely a radical outsider in every discourse he seemed to insert himself into, right? He intervenes in every field that he is participating in, because as a sort of synthetic thinker who is kind of trying not to do theory per se, he was bringing his unique way of seeing things, which I would still call it is a theory, at least at the implicit level. He was bringing that to whatever he was analyzing, studying, interpreting. And I guess I'll just use one example of a way that a sort of Marxist, a sort of post-Marxist or sort of neo-Marxist reading of something that relates to McLuhan and media theory would be Moishe Pistone's Time, Labor, and Social Domination. In this section, I think it's chapter 5, the section on abstract time, he's talking about how there's a time that is unique to capitalism, and we obviously have various ways of talking about that. There's traditional time versus modern time. There is rural time versus city time. And he's using different theorists. He's saying, well, this theorist thinks it's that, and this other theorist thinks it's that. There's people who think about variable time versus fixed time. I think this is very interesting because most cultures, most humans, for the majority of history, obviously have culturally unique ways of thinking about time or being in time. But one thing that is true across the board outside of modernity is variable time, right? Which means it's not super precise. Every hour is not the same length, right? The hour that is the time of day that we take siesta is a different kind of hour than the time of day that we are working, right? And it might be longer. If you were going to be very strict, it's like, wow, it seems like it's approximately an hour and a half by my watch. But it's approximately on average because it's variable. It's relative to the culture and the things that the people care about and the kinds of ways that they actually live their lives and the way that they actually have to engage with nature, okay? The parameters set by nature as opposed to the parameters set by capital within the modern city. And so it's a fascinating section. I meant to wake up at 6 this morning and do a line-by-line analysis and then turn that all into a couple of main points, and then I was going to sit here and read quotes and I was going to really focus on this, but I decided I wanted to do this more introductory thing anyway. So what we're doing is what I decided to do anyway because I slept in. And I slept in because I discovered a new medium, and that is the weighted blanket. So we were using the weighted blanket that Amen here offered us, and I've never slept under something like that, but it made me think that maybe my entire life I've not been sleeping very good because I was afraid I would float away from the bed. Because when you have the weighted blanket on you, you're like, oh. There's this weird sort of sense that I'm not going anywhere. This is where I belong.
That's very interesting.
I've never slept with one, and so anyway, I was 3 hours late getting up. But what I will say,
we needed it also.
We did need it, man. And we've been going to bed at midnight or
10
1,
to midnight,
and getting up every morning at 5 to 6 for
for
this tour. But what I'll say about the Time, Labor, Social Domination section, chapter 5, abstract time, read it yourself. You'll love it, I promise. Is that he debunks the idea that the reason we experience linear progressive time in this sort of abstract way where it's not related to events and it's not cyclical like traditional time. The reason we experience that way is because of the invention of the clock. It's the invention of the clock that made it so we could count fixed time. And so what he attempts to do is to debunk that idea because he says, look, we had the means. Technologically, the means were already there. If we really wanted to count fixed time before modernity, we would have. But instead, it was because church was the major organ of power outside of the monarchy, the church bells were able to pretty much do everything needed in any populace, right? Or any metropolis. He uses this example of a Chinese clock invented in the 13th century or something like that, AD. So it goes back before the time of modernity for sure, where some Chinese inventor had made a clock that counts fixed time. But it was a novelty item, and it wasn't the standard, and it wasn't being used by Chinese people. It was just a novelty. Why was it just a novelty? They didn't need to keep time in this super specific way that lets you cut up every minute into seconds. That makes it so you can refine and calculate everything in the most segmented and separated, abstract way that is removed from human collectivity, that is removed from cyclical life patterns that live on a sort of week to 2 week basis or monthly or annual basis. So the idea is it's not that the clock invented this kind of time. It's that the needs of capital, which were then becoming freed from the church and freed from the state, the needs of capital required a clock like this, a time like this. And it's interesting, it's useful, I think, because it's good to start thinking about the ways that the mediums that we use, not just impact us, but also like where do they come from, and functionally what are they doing, not just to us, but also to make it so that this stage of society where we see no real future and we kind of think of ourselves as being at the end of history, how do these things reproduce that? What is their role in the reproduction of that, right? What does that kind of time do in the reproduction of our sense of individuality? And everyone's got to be in it for themselves at everyone else's expense. These are the kinds of questions that I think the word critical adds to media theory. And so when I say that I am a part of a CMT or critical media theory research cohort, I think that there is a lot of work to be done between these two worlds, the critical theory world and the media theory world. And I think that us being here in the flesh is actually a good start for hopefully something that will unfold slowly and beautifully over the next hundreds of years, right? And I think it will be hundreds of years because I think the relevance is only going to grow. It will not go away. Two proto-CMT insights, I think, that get a lot of people thinking, well, maybe technology is not what I've always thought it is. On the one hand, it's, oh, there's a gun in the house. That changes the dynamic. Obviously, in the United States, the Second Amendment people, like a lot of them in my family, they say, well, the gun didn't kill a person killed a person. It's like, yeah, but that's never what a person's talking about when they have a problem with a gun just being on standby in a house. The point is that when you put this piece of technology in there, how does it actually mediate the relations? Not just between the people in the moment, but how does it actually change the horizon of possibilities? Mm-hmm. Because we are virtually purposive beings, meaning that like we orient ourselves towards the future, right? We make decisions. We have to think about the different possibilities. And if someone just whips out a gun and puts it on the table while you're talking, that changes the dynamic. And people and a lot of liberals in the United States have a basic gut sense that there is something there in that moment. There's something going on. Another example is breaking up by text messaging. There is no general etiquette in the world today about how we should act with one another, how to have friends, how to date. There's no general etiquette. People don't write books about etiquette. It's usually self-help, but it's not how ought one to be among others, and how should we use our new devices. Yeah, we don't really have that. In the Victorian era, it's like, oh, you use this spoon for that, and you use this fork for that, and it's all very, there's a right way to do everything, there's a lot of wrong ways to do things.
Social norms, yeah.
There's not a lot of social norms. But we all know it's messed up to just break up with somebody through text message. Why? Right? Because there's something different about that way of communicating. It is different. And we don't fully understand why or how it's different yet. We just know in our gut that there's a problem here. In the same way that the gun changes the dynamic on the table, Sherry Turkle in Reclaiming Conversation cites studies that show that putting a phone on the table during a conversation also changes the way that the conversation will unfold. Mm-hmm. It makes other people want to pick up their phone. It makes them less able to really take seriously and think about what's being said. Mm-hmm. So that means that putting your phone off the table can actually, at a subliminal level, sign a sort of commitment or stake in the conversation space, mm-hmm. right?
And the potential for the distraction keeps the conversation shallow. Because why get into anything deeper when someone's going to tune out?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and so I'm just saying that these are proto-media theory insights. I say proto in the sense that like they could be left at the level of, oh, you just acknowledge that it makes things different and then we move on with our lives. Or we use these kind of insights to start to trace out the contours of an actually existing field of knowledge and consciousness and experience that we all live in, that we want to become better oriented in, and actually kind of through becoming better acquainted with how it all works, gain some kind of relative freedom, some kind of relative autonomy. And I think that's where Marshall McLuhan and Martin Heidegger both agree. In the Question Concerning Technology, Heidegger says it as, it's about gaining, it's not about breaking free or living away from devices or living without technology, but it's about through basically living the examined life, gaining a relative freedom to live with them. And so I think that's what we're all here to do. And critical media theory is something I'm very excited about. And that's my talk. So thank you for having me. And just clap.
Just please clap.
Just do it. I don't know how to end this thing. I don't have a witty little ending point. But what I will say then is that the way this is going to go is Anne will present, and then if Nance has some thoughts, he's the other tour crew person who couldn't make it into Canada because he doesn't have his passport, but he is joining us remotely. Nance, is there any chance that it matters if you go next or after Anne? Does it matter to you? Because he's like commuting, and so
if he went next, I could run a little back.
I'm unsure if the Wi-Fi is going to support it at all. Like I've been dropping the whole time.
Okay. You should go for it. Nance, how about you just say?
I would love to.
Nance, how about you just say right now, like 1 to 3 minutes worth of kind of what you wanted to talk about, and kind of make a promise to talk about it in the future once we're able to kind of come back to the channel and do it after the fact. And that way, Anne has an opportunity to run to the bathroom, which she's doing right now. Andrew's escorting her. But yeah, just for the people watching this in the future, as well as those of us who are here right now, maybe just share a little bit about what you wanted to talk about, and that'll also give us a chance to kind of assess the strength of your connection.
All right. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. I'm on a train in upstate New York right now. And that's actually pretty interesting. I've been thinking about for the last 45 minutes, I've been trying to get a Zoom call to work on a train on the Wi-Fi that was provided by the train. And that's interesting, right? Because it's like I'm traveling and I'm kind of answering to the call of what you could recognize as business, even though this isn't really a business endeavor. I guess it would still fit into that category. But like on airplanes, people are like, oh, I gotta go. I gotta get this flight. Give me the red eye, get there as fast as possible. And I don't know, I am a bit frazzled right now from running up and down this train. But that seems interesting to me. I'm on a train. It's taking me like 18 hours to go somewhere that probably would have been, I don't know, a 4 or 5 hour flight. And I'm still trying to participate in this endeavor that, it's creative, it's educational, it's communal in a way. It's ultimately, I'm trying to communicate, but I am at the mercy of the infrastructure that we have. And that itself is an interesting question from a critical media theory perspective. What I've been writing all morning, or trying to write all morning through my lack of sleep, I really wanted to focus on this idea that I guess dawned on Dave and I the other day. We were at a state park, and they had some information, some public information signs, and it was very, very well written prose. And it was just kind of like the explicit message of this well-crafted copy that was on these signs was, hey, everybody, look at where your tax dollars are going. Celebrate our abundance. almost like trying to convince people that we still have commons. But it was really well done. And along with that, there was, it seemed that there was an implicit PMC self-awareness where the writer of these things was, artfully crafting this product that he could sell. And in the selling of his product, he was also selling himself or their self and ensuring their own
There we go.
PMC segment of society. Hello. I think I dropped.
No, you're all right.
Oh, no.
You are okay. Just so you know, it all came through up until like a point when it just barely got a little clunky, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, right? We're critical of mediums here, right? That's the whole point. We're demonstrating breakdowns. But so having this really, really cool, really emergent experience with copywriting was really cool. And then Dave and I started doing our cynical thing, and we started talking about like the death of copywriting as a medium and as a thing, and people don't really interact with that type of copy anymore. Advertising copy, all our advertisements are just memes, or they're just people's body parts with one large word written across that says, product. Like the art of advertising, which is a weird thing to say. What did I say the other day? Even our bullshit has become even more bullshit nowadays with how everything has just become so senseless and so meaningless and just so like postmodern. And that's a topic that is really interesting to me. And I wanted to talk about that and kind of tie it into my own cynical position on all of this. That I think, I think we might be in a position that something catastrophic has to happen before any type of change can happen. And I hope that's not the case. But it sure does feel that way sometimes.
Is that it? Oh, is that it?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, okay. You just gotta say thank you, and then we'll all know. No, that was good. Thank you. And so then, I guess I didn't really introduce Nance, but Nance is one of the most avid supporters of Theory Underground, has been here since before day one, has taken all of the Theory Underground courses, and has just engaged with me on a level that makes me better. And so I really appreciate it. And I think you're awesome, man. And we wish you could be here in the flesh. I was going to say a thing about this idea of being in the flesh. And that is that what the internet calls it the meat space. And it's meat spelled with an A, right? MEAT. Because our physical bodies are here in the flesh. But it's also the meat space, like MEET. Of course, we meet online, but like maybe you can't really meet without the meat. I don't know. Just want to play on that idea.
I like that.
Anyway, all right. Well, now I'm going to introduce a little nepotism here, and that is my wife, Anne Snellgrove McKerracher. She graduated from Boise State University with a bachelor's in social science, is returning there to study all kinds of crazy, awesome things that she might tie into her actual talk. But the point is that she's been on a gap year here for like a year and a half, during which we got married, but we also traveled the world. We went to Europe to like 7 countries. We lived in Mexico for 5 months. Now obviously we're doing this national tour, so we are all over the place and we're having a great time doing it. But Anne has been one of the co-researchers at Theory Underground two times. First with the idea of the university, which we co-taught with our colleague and friend Brian Weeks, and then she's currently teaching critical media theory with me, and that cohort's been absolutely wonderful. And she brings to the table a sort of social science perspective, as well as what she'll be talking about today, which is some of these more sort of popular works on living with devices and others in a very technological modern world. So today she will be talking about two very important and interrelated concepts, solitude and solicitude. Please put your hands together for Anne Snellgrove McKerracher.
Can people turn their cameras on? Is
They
that
can,
allowed?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
they
gonna
should,
encourage
actually.
it, yeah.
Dave,
For real.
this is an international book tour. I don't know if you recall that we crossed a
Yeah,
border.
we're in Canada right now, so it is international.
Honestly, it's not the
so we're in
53rd
Canada,
state,
just
people.
saying. First of all, you're all allowed to turn your cameras on if you'd like. I don't know what you're doing. If you're not wearing clothes or pants, like, live your best life. But it is nice to see people's faces. But if not, like I said, you do you. Nance is on a train right now, which is kind of a cool background when you're not chopping in and out. But yes, so thank you for that introduction. I think that's kind of what you need to know about me and what I bring to the table here in this discussion. So I really first wanted to start off by talking about the critical media theory research cohort that we have going on at Theory Underground right now. We meet once a month where we discuss one and more kind of philosophical text, and then on the other side we discuss a bit more of a maybe popular science, social science, or more accessible book as opposed to like pure, hard, difficult theory. And this cohort started back this summer. We go once a month, and our very first texts were some Marshall McLuhan and then Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, kind of a McLuhan influence look into the development of the television as a medium during the 80s. I think I want to kind of touch on something that Dave had said earlier, which is that Theory Underground is a critical media experiment. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that it was. We didn't really have this conception of Theory Underground being a critical media experiment until we really started developing the critical media theory course. I think that's when we, to my understanding, realized that what we're doing here, not only what Theory Underground is, but what we fundamentally care about within Theory Underground is media theory and critical media theory as an experiment. And I think that, media theory and critical media theory go hand in hand with underground education, underground little experiments, underground or smaller institutions such as the McLuhan Institute or Cadell Last's Philosophy Portal. He's a friend of Theory Underground. I think those are important to the critical media theory dialogue because we are, we have lots of literature to back this up, but also I think just anyone living in the modern times can kind of see the crisis of technology and the crisis of humanity that we're all tuned into at some level. Neoliberalized, instrumentalized education on the one hand, where, education and reading and understanding theory gets reduced and pushed to the side so we all can learn some job skills and go work for the rest of our lives for 40 plus hours a week to barely scrape by. We have that. On the other hand, I think we see, especially in young people, I'm probably one of the younger representatives here in Theory Underground. I got my first iPad when I was 11 years old. Got a social media Instagram account back in like 7th grade.
Wow.
So I was 12 or 13, and I've been on these platforms for like the most crucial developmental years of my life. And so I have this like very deep personal experience of how this has impacted my life. I've seen the ways it's impacted my peers and relationships and my education. And then people of all generations, I think, are starting to see, maybe 2-year-olds shouldn't be on iPads. Maybe 5-year-olds shouldn't be influencers. So that's another crisis. And within that, something that Sherry Turkle talks about in the book that David just mentioned, Reclaiming Conversation. It was the book that we kind of discussed in our second month of the critical media theory course, is this crisis in empathy that is emerging, especially among children, because we, as a society, we just assume, it's easy, it takes the burden off of parents, and there's some truth in that, and the time energy issue of parents not having the time or energy to be there and be present for their kids. It's, well, there's YouTube, there's TV, there's iPads, let's put that in front of them. But what, teachers have reported, what studies are showing, what we're seeing is that kids especially are having a harder time building and developing empathy because they are not having, face-to-face play dates as much. So they are not getting the chance to develop communication and understand how their words impact other people, because on the one hand, they're just not spending as much time with kids. I think one of the really powerful anecdotes that Turkle writes about is she's at a park, a playground, and there was a kid off to the side under a tree on his iPad. So he's there in this physical space with other kids and the potential to play with them, but instead he's still seemingly playing with other children, but it's not that very intimate kind of human face-to-face meet up because of the screen, because of the technology. So on the one hand, there's not this capacity to develop empathy and be with others, and on the other hand, kids don't have as much alone time. We don't have as much time to just be with ourselves, for young children to use their imagination for play, for teenagers to just sit with the weird teen angst. We're constantly able to distract ourselves from it by checking Instagram, checking TikTok, checking Twitter, tuning into YouTube stream. And that is a problem. I think we can say there's an issue there. Obviously, there's good things that come from it, but there's a lot of negative, unforeseen consequences that we are just now developing and starting to see emerging. And so that is kind of the cultural context that we, Dave and I especially, came to realize that we said we need to tackle this issue in Theory Underground. So this is, I think, one of the first 5 courses that have been offered at Theory Underground, alongside the idea of the university and the professional managerial class, some of these foundational ideas that Theory Underground builds itself upon. So the critical media theory course, like I had kind of mentioned, the purpose of this course is to combine theory and philosophy with popular or more approachable social science, or more practical social science, you can say. And we see a lot of self-help books coming out nowadays. We see a lot of critiques of technology, critiques of social media, that are all fine and dandy, and I'm sure helping a lot of people. But what we came to realize is, that self-help and trying to take action to change the situation and to help yourself and to help your own relationship with technology will be aided by, and will probably be stronger and more successful by having a theoretical basis in the field. And so, as Dave mentioned, Marshall McLuhan is he's our Socrates, or our Plato, or our Marx of the field of media theory. And because of that, I just want to say I'm really honored to be here in this space, to be meeting Andrew. It's a beautiful kind of early fall day here in Canada. We're in this awesome kind of rustic barn, surrounded by books, surrounded by good people in the meat space, and it's really awesome. And I'm so honored to be here, so thank you. And so, anyways.
Solitude and Solicitude.
Yeah, Solitude and Solicitude. And so that's kind of what our critical media theory course is doing, is attempting to do. The reason we have spaced it out as opposed to having, a class every week or class every other week. We have the class once a month where Dave and I each give a lecture. Dave focusing more on the philosophical text, me focusing on the kind of more popular science or social science text. So we've read Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle. This month we just, like literally last weekend, we explored, sorry, they're taking a selfie with the camera. I love it. We explored Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky, a pretty foundational sociological text. We'll be going to Hate Inc. by Matt Taibbi, Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, books like that. And so I give the lectures and kind of the interpretation on those, but the cool part of our cohort, because it's so small, it's a research cohort, and so we have a lot of dialogue, we have a lot of conversations. And one of the kind of really important ideas that have emerged, or talking points that have emerged from reading Sherry Turkle, as well as from having this McLuhan basis of understanding the media or mediums as its own kind of can of worms rather than just the content coming from our media, is the idea of solitude and solicitude. And so yeah, in response to this problem that we see that Sherry Turkle highlights and has a lot of anecdotes and research studies for, kids not being able to develop empathy as well, people just in general spending less time with others and spending less time with themselves, she puts forth this idea of the virtuous circle being this relationship between solitude and solicitude. She also, in her book, she describes it as having, like, in your life, 1 chair, 2 chairs, and 3 chairs. So 1 chair being for solitude. I think this was in relation to Thoreau and the way that his house was set up out in the woods. He had 1 chair for himself, 2 chairs for, like, immediate solicitude with another person, 3 chairs for more people, for kind of society. And in our course, we're specifically focusing on solitude and solicitude as like sort of a maelstrom strategy, which is something that before our course started, we were lucky enough to have Andrew join us and talk to us about this idea of maelstrom strategies, which maybe you can touch on when you come up here. But solitude and solicitude as a response, as something that we can take claim to, that we can take charge of in an attention economy that is constantly trying to take our time and attention and energy away from us by the algorithms and the addictiveness of these technologies. And so what are solitude and solicitude? Solitude is genuine time with oneself, away from having other ideas or messages coming into you. It's just time with yourself as an individual, time to think your own thoughts. I think today we have a lot of people, like, they go home, they're done with work, they have that me time, but me time is not actual me time. It's time to scroll, time to be constantly getting an influx of information. Garbage time. as Dave develops in kind of the theory.
Got that from Eamon.
Which, yeah, Eamon, actually, who's here with us, that was he coined that term in relation to time energy and time energy theory. And so it's garbage time. It's time where, yeah, you're distracted from yourself. And why that is detrimental is because you don't have the time to be with yourself, to sit with your emotions, to understand them, but more importantly, you're kind of dehumanizing yourself in a sense that because you're not engaging in any sort of dialogue with yourself or with your mind and with your thoughts, that ability to build empathy, to have empathy, to see others for who they are is not as strong because you don't even have that within yourself. And so solitude, yeah, is that genuine, uninterrupted time with yourself. And some strategies that we have sort of developed within the course is, and I think it's something that I was inspired, Andrew, by something that you had said in our meeting, is just like it can be 15 minutes, like you had said, 15 minutes of just reading a day is response or his kind of resistance to this attention economy. Well, I think the same thing applies to solitude. It's something that I know, like Christopher, who's here joining us, has been really inspired by. Even just 15 minutes of, I'm going to go on a walk without my phone, without music, and just be. And it's not a just be in a like meditative, new agey way of I'm going to meditate, because you're still at that point, it's good for you for sure, but you're not engaging with your thoughts, thinking about the world, thinking about what did I do today? What did I say today? How am I feeling today? And so yeah, it is kind of this challenge that we've all taken on to get some real solitude in a world that never allows for it. And then solitude goes hand in hand with solicitude. Solicitude being genuine, uninterrupted, distraction-free time with others to have real or like risky conversations that are difficult to have, or conversations that require more time and energy and attention to really get into topics that matter. You know, if you're standing in an elevator with someone going, oh, the weather today, yeah, that's not like real solicitude in the way that Sherry Turkle imagines it. Excuse me. And so in the same vein that we challenge people in our cohort, that we challenge all of you, that we challenge ourselves to have time for real solitude with ourselves, we take on this challenge to have real solicitude with other people. So take a phone call and try to challenge yourself to not distract yourself on your phone, on the phone call. Try to meet people in real life and challenge yourself to say, hey, we're going to keep our phones away so we can just be here and talk about the things that matter and talk about the things that interest us. And this solitude and solicitude, in the way that it's presented in Reclaiming Conversation, it's, you know, a very like popular book. It's easily accessible. It's something we can easily put into practice within that Theory Underground. And in this critical media theory cohort, we take it a step further and try to kind of critically and rigorously understand the ways that the mediums, the technologies, the attention economy, and capitalist society more in general are trying to kind of take away from our own ability to have genuine solitude and solicitude, because not only does having solitude and solicitude, make our own lives better, makes our potential for both solitude and solicitude better, because having real time with ourselves and being able to develop empathy and kind of having that ongoing relationship and dialogue with yourself makes you more available and open to others, and then having genuine solicitude with others then gives you, fodder for your genuine solitude. That's kind of where the virtuous circle, cyclical process of it comes from. You need both. We try to take it a little bit deeper here at Theory Underground. And it is all very much based in this media theory, trying to understand media, trying to understand mediums critically. And it's something that, as the weeks go by and we have these conversations and we engage with media theory and more texts both by and inspired by Marshall McLuhan, I see the importance of media theory in education, in sociology, in philosophy, because to me, from my perspective, we truly are in this crisis of humanity, in this crisis of technology. And something that Dave had kind of touched on is that I will be going back for a master's degree starting this spring in the fields of sociology, education, and then hopefully some philosophy. Unfortunately, I've discovered in the last few weeks, like, all of the philosophy theory courses within the education department, all of the media theory courses in the communication department for graduate level, gone, not going to be offered anymore because there's no interest in it, because it's not practical job skills, and I want to really incorporate it and use it as a foundation in my studies to build up or to help develop, a new model of education, a new model of maybe underground education, underground thought, underground movements, and how to bring the idea and the ethic of the university that Carl Jaspers develops in The Idea of the University, to develop this media theory and understanding into, how do we make education and our conversations and our intellect as a society better. And critical media theory is the foundation of that. And so I'm looking forward to coming into the university and going, no, we're not shutting down communication. We're not shutting down English. We're like, it's important. It matters just to have good lives and to hopefully make our society better. And so with that being said, I'm going to plug our critical media theory course. We still have 3 months to go, so it's not too late to get involved. You can watch the courses or the lectures after the fact. This is going to be an ongoing conversation as well. It's not just going to end once the course is over. The Theory Underground Hub events, this critical media theory, topics of discussion and readings are always kind of a foundation in some of our conversations. And so you can check out the class information at theory-underground.com, or, I mean, that's the place for it. Or download the app and check it out there. Available on iOS and Android. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Such an honor to be here. And I think we're going to hear from Andrew again.
Good job.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you. Whoa. That was slower than I thought.
That was excellent. Thank you, Anne. Wow, a lot there to think about and a lot to potentially respond to. I guess my advantage is I can pick and choose just what I do respond to.
Exactly.
Thank you all on the internet for tuning in. Yeah, it's great that we can all do these kind of para-academic activities. You know, I don't see myself as anti-academic. And the funny thing is I'm going next week to Indiana to give a talk at a university, you know, and I barely graduated high school. I don't have any degrees at all. Somebody messaged me earlier saying, Professor McLuhan, can you tell me about this thing? And, you know, I hate to disabuse them of the notion, but I don't have a doctorate, much less a bachelor's degree in anything. And the wonderful thing is that you don't actually have to, you know. Academia has become kind of this. I don't want to speak too poorly about it. Oh, some of my best friends are academics, you know, really, and they can be wonderful places, but they've also kind of outlived their usefulness in some ways and turned into this kind of very closed system that just perpetuates. You know, you get a degree and then you need to get another degree and then need to get another degree so that you can teach and get another degree and keep publishing and all this stuff. And it's truly an awful treadmill at times, I think, which I'd like to say I was smart enough to avoid, but it really wasn't intentional so much as I just had enough of school. The wonderful thing is that it's not necessary. And you can start something called Theory Underground, and I can start something called the McLuhan Institute, and do our own thing. Marshall and my father, Eric, with Catherine Hutchin, wrote a book called City as Classroom. And their point with City as Classroom, one of Marshall's points he was making this early in the 1950s, if not the 40s, that you know, schools were obsolete. They no longer had the monopoly on knowledge that they used to, and that they were accustomed to advertising. You know, for quite a long time now, there's been more information available outside of the school than within it. And universities were organized in the first place because the reverse was true. The university was at one time the place to go to learn all these things. This was where knowledge was, and if you wanted to learn things, that's where you went. That hasn't been true for quite a long time, much to their chagrin. So now we have the internet as our classroom, which is a wonderful thing. It also comes with many challenges. I see the internet like New York City. New York City is a wonderful place. Also at times an awful place, but you get something with this critical density of people that it makes certain things possible that aren't possible other times. This is a prime example here. if I were to hold a class here, nobody would show up. Indeed, I invited some people to come today, including members of the local media, the newspapers, and none of them showed up, which is fine. But I don't need them to show up because we can reach you online. The difficult, and that's the great thing, is like in New York City, you could open up a store that only sells T-shirts manufactured in the USA between 1970 and 1983, and you'd make a living, you know. Likewise, I can start at the McLuhan Institute and I can offer courses. You can start Theory Underground. You can offer courses, and almost make a living. You know.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite. I've quit my day job for better or worse, but you know. The difficulty is that, and where the analogy fails, is that we're talking about a city of billions of people. And how do you find them? How do they find you? This is our challenge. The advantage of the university, the advantage of New York City, is that it's all in one place. And, you know, if you want to discover, you want a great Chinese meal, you go to Chinatown. You know, you want to learn about McLuhan. Well, let's not use McLuhan. You want to learn, you know, you go to the right department. You're not likely to learn much about McLuhan in most universities. But that's why we have the McLuhan Institute. These are some of the challenges. It's funny, you were saying meat space. And I'm thinking, you know, meat time. You know, you need some me time. Meat time is kind of related there
Solitude
too.
and solitude. Me time and meat time.
Right.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
The virtuous circle between me time and meat time. Yeah.
Wordplay all day around here. But this is important that academia no longer has a monopoly on knowledge or instruction, and we can very much do it ourselves. Indeed, we have to, because if we don't, who's going to? And that's why I started the McLuhan Institute, because it didn't exist. And I felt that there would come a time my father wouldn't be around, and there was nothing in place to keep going. Indeed, he died less than a year after I decided to start the McLuhan Institute. You know, Dave said that Theory Underground is a critical media theory experiment. I think TMI is a bit of a media ecology experiment. In his last speech, which he gave the day before he died, Media Ecology in the 21st Century, Dad said media ecology is not a spectator sport. It's about doing things and being active. It's about creating Theory Underground, or creating the McLuhan Institute, or going back to school and giving them hell because they want to close the communication department or whatever else. It's about, you know, doing what our friend Michael is doing, which is working his job to pay the bills, but not letting that stop him have a active life and exploration of other things. I mean, I don't make a lot of money with the McLuhan Institute. You might be, surprised to find out. But it's the other work that I do, consulting and teaching and other things, giving lectures. Well, no, not giving lectures. They don't pay a lot for lectures. But, these things. I love a cat climbing the window screen. That's a great thing. And I love that they brought a cat with them. This is also a wonderful thing. So I think underground, not to you can call yourself what you like. I think underground is kind of the wrong word, because in order for us to be relevant, we can't be underground. We have to be above ground. We have to be out there in the world, in meat space. I love that you're doing a book tour in a minivan. You're crossing borders between states and countries, coming to Canada. This is a great thing. This is how it used to be done. And it's a very important way of building connection and community. So it really is my privilege that you came by here and included myself and the McLuhan Institute in it. So many fun things I wanted to comment on that you mentioned. you mentioned that democracy in the USA may be broken. This is an interesting thing and something I think about. I can't claim it to be my original thought. Marshall pointed it out to me that the United States is a unique country in the world.
No, bud.
You're sorry.
That's fine. He's fine. The cat's messing things up. It's cool.
He's a fly. It's very.
He found a fly.
It's interesting because the United States was founded on print, the printed word, and the speed of print, and the printed word, and indeed the whole notion of United States style representative democracy was founded at a time when people couldn't all go to Washington, so they needed to appoint a person from their community to go there on the behalf to make the decisions for them, because it takes weeks, for months even in those times, for letters to go back and forth from Washington. And that made sense in their time, in a time of the age of print in the post of mail. But we passed that time a long time ago. The telegraph blew that out of the water. Trains. I love that we have Nance joining us in, and I particularly enjoyed his train of thought.
Nice.
But we created these structures in a particular technological circumstance, and the world moved on technologically, but the structure hasn't, and this creates a kind of structural dissonance because we've removed the foundation that was supporting this structure, and the structure cannot hold. This is why we have these kind of hangovers from institutions and media of the past, but we no longer have the foundation for them. Literacy as well is something that is without the foundation it once had, and we undermine them at every turn. But the democracy is in the USA is a great example because no longer do we need to send somebody to Washington to represent our views. We can do an internet poll, or there could be an app for that. Really most of what they do in Washington is largely unnecessary. It makes no sense in today's world, but they're not willing to change things in order to account for it, and that accounts for a lot of the problems I think that we have. Another thing Dave said was that in academia, Marshall McLuhan was a fad. It's really interesting how Marshall was received in academia, and it was a complicated thing. You have to keep in mind that when Marshall came up and was doing his thing, he started teaching at the University of Toronto in 1946, and that's basically when his real media studies work got kicked off. There was no such thing as interdisciplinary studies. If you think that knowledge is siloed now, 60, 70, 80 years ago, it was incredibly siloed, and you were not welcome in anybody else's program. English professors should stay in English, economics stay in economics, etc., etc. Marshall's work, media studies, is necessarily interdisciplinary because it touches everything. And in order to understand it, you need to come from all points of view. So it's necessarily an interdisciplinary project. And because of that, Marshall stepped on a lot of toes. He wasn't trying to. Well, maybe he was trying to a little bit. But, he wasn't trying to make enemies. He was trying to, he called it needling the somnambulists in a letter to Ezra Pound. He was trying to wake people up. And it's great to see that people are waking up a little bit. But so Marshall didn't make many friends in academia for various reasons. Another one of the reasons was that it was very. We have this term public intellectual now, which didn't exist in his time, because that was not the sort of thing a professor did. You know, it was very unseemly for a professor to go on the radio or the television and be so in the press and what are you doing? Well, Marshall, funnily enough, was doing kind of the same thing. I'm doing the same thing he was doing, which is realizing that I need to step outside of my meat space or whatever in order to reach people. Because if Marshall had just stayed within the university confines, nobody today would know who he was. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So that also didn't win him many friends. And it persists to this day because the professors who didn't like him then had grad students who had grad students who have grad students. And here we are. A lot of these things, a lot of these academic grudges get passed down, which is kind of sad, very sad. But this discussion of meat space, although it's not a term Marshall would have used, it's a theme that he explored extensively, and it's not new because Marshall said. He was thinking about this in relation to the telephone and the telegraph, that whether you're on the phone or on the radio, you're not just here, you're everywhere else. Mm-hmm. This is an interesting thing, is that he originally spoke of this as a condition of angelism. He related it to angels who don't have physical bodies. He later called it discarnate. He stepped away from angelism for the obvious implications and moved to using this term discarnate to speak of our lives outside of our bodies or no longer dependent in the same way as our bodies. And here we are in 2023 where the latest polls have people spending 8 to 12 hours a day on screens, online. Just like that's a verifiable statistic, and it's wild to think about. But this has very, very serious complications because without a body, it changes many, many things about us. And I wonder, what Anne quoted Sherry Turkle as this crisis in empathy. I wonder if we're having a crisis in empathy because empathy is a very bodily thing. How many of these things which we are going through now are the result of losing touch with our bodies, of living outside our bodies, where our body is no longer the determining factor that it used to be. This very much explains a lot of the difficulties that we have in relation to our bodies, what a bodily identity means in terms of gender and sexuality and anything else. Because if you don't have a body, how do you have a gender? What does that even mean? These are things worth thinking about, which need to be talked about by a lot more than some random kids calling themselves media theorists or whatever else. They need to be talked about in Washington. They need to be talked about in Silicon Valley, because that's where these changes happen, or where nobody's doing anything about the changes that happen. And this is the main object of what I'm doing here at the McLuhan Institute, which is to try and bring these conversations forward more and more, and to use all the tools at our disposal to look at the effects of technologies. And I'm not particularly that concerned with theory. I'm not sure most people are. People want to understand what's going on. And what I'm interested in McLuhan work, and any other work for that matter, is what is useful for helping us make a difference in our lives. So that's the reasoning behind this Maelstrom escape strategies thing that I did. Actually, this is Survive is one of the pieces The main thrust of Maelstrom escape strategies is recognizing that we're in this technological vortex and we're going down fast. And what do you do about it? Well, so how do you escape the vortex? And the first thing is to simply survive. So find a PDF, something to hold on to, some eddy out of the current to catch your breath. After you've caught your breath and have your wits about you, to find ways of escaping the actual vortex, get safe, get on dry land. And then thirdly, after you've survived and escaped, to avoid the next one instead of jumping headfirst into it like we do every time a new technology comes around. We can't wait to incorporate it into our lives and be fundamentally reshaped by it. This is not a strategy for survival and continuity of culture at all. One of these ways is as Anne mentioned, going outside and taking a walk without bringing your phone with you, and not necessarily meditating or whatever, but just being. And it's a difficult thing for somebody who's used to listening to a podcast while they walk or on the bus or train or whatever else. It's very difficult to be confronted with that lack of mediation. Here in the country, people think that it's really quiet and peaceful, and it might be kind of peaceful, but it's not quiet. There's a lot going on. I like to think about it in terms of generative distractions. If you sit and watch a sunset versus if you sit and watch a TV program, they're very, very different experiences, although arguably no less filled with information. But when you sit and watch the clouds go by, you contemplate, and when you sit and watch television, you vegetate. I should have written that down. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
We got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, perfect. So, Maelstrom escape strategies. Another one of them. Why I suggest people read on paper. Oh, you've got somebody in the waiting room.
Oh, thank you.
Why I suggest people reading on paper versus reading on screens, ebooks, or whatever else. It is not just because I'm particularly fond of paper and books, which I am, but because they're different media, they're different technologies. When you read on a screen, your eye tends to scan and skip, and when you read on a page, less so. And you can experiment and try this, but part of this has to do with the difference between media, in that when you're looking at a page and reading a page, you're looking at light reflecting off it, versus when you're reading a screen, the light is coming through the source, and these have very, very different effects, cognitive effects. The other thing has to do with fonts. Interestingly enough, serif fonts, which are what are mostly used on paper, the letters with the little ticks on the end of them, kind of anchor the eye and follow you to encourage you to stick with it more. Sans serif fonts encourage you more to browse. It's odd, but it's a thing. And the thing is, you read more slowly on paper. And this is important. It's the same reason why I encourage people to write by hand. So try the reading experiment, but try the writing experiment. Try writing a page a day by hand, pen or pencil. And it can be just looking around the room, looking at the window and making observations. It can be writing, maybe try writing a letter to somebody. This is a good way. Everybody would love to get a letter from you. I'd love to get a letter from you. And you can write to me at P.O. Box 237, Bloomfield, Ontario, if you wish. I usually write back. But write a letter, and because when you write by hand, I've clocked it myself. I write at about 40 words a minute by hand. I type at 80. on my computer. And these lead to very, very different things. So your mind has to slow down to follow your hand. And if you find that you're a very anxious person, that you're suffering the same way we all are, this kind of hyper life that we live, one way to actually get a breather and slow down is to write by hand, because it slows it. It's like gearing down in a truck when you're hitting a big hill. It slows down the machine. So these are coping strategies or kind of ways to find breathing room in eddies while we're going through this vortex that we have, because not everybody can just throw their smartphone away and go live on an island, Tahiti, or move to Bahamas or whatever. That's just not feasible. People have to work, sometimes 2 jobs. People have to raise their kids. But you can find 15 minutes a day to do this. I know you can. Everybody can. The kids do eventually fall asleep, and you can take 15 minutes, and you'll feel better for it. Maybe. Oh yeah. One other thing I'll mention is I forget the context. Dave or Ann said it, but you kind of asked where media come from, and Marshall McLuhan answers this in Understanding Media. I taught a class on it last week. The chapter 4, The Gadget Lover, Narcissus as Narcosis. Really interesting chapter. Very dense. It's like half a dozen pages long, but it's so packed with information. And Marshall brings up this guy, what's his name? Adolf, someone or other, who wrote this book about biology, and it's about irritation and counter-irritation. And Marshall's thesis is that we create technologies essentially because of a pressure of some kind, a social pressure, or even a technological pressure. And it's our answer to make something faster, more efficient, easier, whatever. But the meat of the chapter, Narcissus as Narcosis, is talking about this Greek myth of Narcissus. And his take on the Narcissus myth is a little different than the one we commonly think of today when people speak about narcissists and narcissism. And if you actually go in and read the myth, it's in Ovid in his Metamorphosis, Book 3. And Narcissus finds this pool, and he leans down to take a drink, and is confronted with his image and becomes fascinated by it, and eventually withers away and dies, unable to break the spell he's come under. The difficulty is that he doesn't recognize it as his image. He thinks he's looking at somebody else, not himself. And this is the main point. And I think what differentiates it from our take on narcissism these days is that he doesn't understand that he's actually looking at an extension of himself. And I was very interested in this because it made me think about another Greek myth that has to do with image and reflection, and that is the one about Perseus. And Perseus in the myth is the one who slays Medusa, the Gorgon. Medusa, the Gorgon, is this fearsome beast who turns people to stone when they look at her. And how Perseus slays the Gorgon is by shining up his shield to like a mirror finish and looking at her obliquely, indirectly, and that's how he can avoid being turned to stone. This to me is a really interesting reversal of the Narcissus story, because instead of being fascinated with the reflection, he's using the reflection as a means to cut off the head of the Medusa. This to me is possibly a strategy of escaping our maelstrom. And I'm kind of surprised that that Marshall never hit on it or used it, and he didn't, as far as I could see. But I'm really interested in that comparison these days. I was also really fascinated on that discussion of time. There's a speech Marshall gave, and I should have led with this, but at the beginning he talks about how time, is subjective and different for different people. And indeed, for the speaker, the time is really short, and you have so much to say, while for the audience it seems to stretch to eternity. So with that, I'll close my comments and just say thank you all for tuning in here. Thank you especially to Dave and Anne and Eamon, who's a neighbor I didn't know I had over in Kingston, Ontario, for coming and doing this IRL thing, kicking off. I want to do a lot of things here at the McLuhan Institute, including a lot more of this kind of thing, and I think this is a great first one, so thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. A dry cough attack coming in here.
Actually, we're gonna take like a 1.5 minute break. So what I hope that you all will do in the Zoom side is
Talk amongst yourselves.
raise your hands. Yeah, raise your hands if you have questions for us. And if you don't have a question that comes immediately to mind, or you think that it's too stupid to say, you're wrong. And just sit there and write something out. Just think about it for a second. Take this 1.5 minutes to breathe and reflect. I'll be right back. I have to grab the GoPro. I realized I actually didn't need it for this next. This next part of what we're doing here. So.
Right. My kids will be getting off the bus in about 10 minutes.
Okay. Cool.
Country life. It's a beautiful thing. The bus comes and magically takes them away at 7:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And then delivers them back to me at about 3:05 in the afternoon.
It is
Oh
magical.
my goodness. Cool.
Yeah, summer is great, but I'm glad when school's back.
Yeah.
It gives me the day again.
Mm-hmm. How old are your kids?
7 and 9.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
My goodness, excuse me.
So you have like a health issue or something?
I'm just on the tail end of a cold, and I'm so prone to like that dry cough.
Yeah.
Like, I've been fine for a week now, but it's like I get the lingering cough for 2 weeks. So I sound worse than I am, I swear.
Yeah, I hate that.
So apologies. They come on, and I'm like, oh my god.
I had that with COVID. Lingering cough. After you're better.
The gift that keeps on giving.
no.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no.
Oh no.
I know. I got
The cough.
the dry cough attack. It'll pass.
Age will pass. So let's see. I just want to get this angle because I don't want the Zoom one to be what we have for this section. All right, and this section matters to me because the panel portion is, I think, the coolest part.
Should we bring this chair over, or are you gonna sit?
I'll sit there.
Okay, perfect.
We'll just have 2 angles on the panel.
Sweet.
That one and this one. Okay, it's recording. We're good. Okay.
And do you want my
Mic
seat
check,
then?
mic check. No. Mic check, mic check. All right, everybody. I hope this is coming through just fine, this one. But here you go.
Oh, hello, Mike Jack. I always wanted to do a speech with a hype man. You know, doing ad libs
Who's that?
behind my speech. Oh, that could be. Oh, good. My wife is home, so I don't need to meet the kids off the school bus.
Oh, it's not the media. Damn it.
Right.
The local media.
Even better.
All right, everybody. Now you can hear me. I just realized you all couldn't hear the mic check. I had muted it on the Zoom side so you could all talk.
Yeah.
during that break. Well, we're back now, and from the Zoom side, you should be able to see where it says Ann Snellgrove. That is actually the panel.
The panel.
And then here I am, and we're all kind of in a line. And so let's do questions. Let's also just share comments and thoughts that we might have. It looks like Nance probably had to drop because his train reached a stop, and he's probably trying to arrange transportation to the next city because he's trying to get to us because we're going to meet him tomorrow in Burlington, Vermont.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when we get
Nice.
together with Todd McGowan. And so, yeah, okay. Anybody have any questions? We have a speaker you'll be able to come through on.
I'll jump in. It's Mats. Can you hear me?
We got you. Yep.
Okay. I have to go back to work in like 1 minute, but I listened to Sam McCormick, and he was talking about the gaze, and when we are seen like on Instagram, we perceive ourselves as whole, as not lacking, right? We it's like the mirror image until there's a spot. He gets into some details, but I just wanted to say that in the Instagram, right? But we are presenting ourselves on Instagram, and we are observing and experiencing ourselves as being seen as not lacking. So that's my media comment. And I'm really proud of you guys. It is amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vince.
That's a good point.
Okay, I'm back to work. Catch you later.
Take care.
Bye.
I think it's so cool when people are able to join from their work or, like on break. And yeah.
I guess Mike had to get back to work.
Yeah. I think Mikey had to get back to work too.
But that's okay. There's other bearded fellows in the virtual room.
Yeah.
Oh,
There we go.
hello.
There we go.
It works. It makes a difference.
Does
Yeah,
it-
for
does it
the-
really make a
For
difference?
the computer audio.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the camera audio,
Oh yeah, true.
because that is all synced up in the future.
I think I look better with a microphone accessory. I don't know.
It makes you
does
feel-
something for my image.
Well, there's this thing that about, the meat space becoming also like a hybrid space. And like what you can do with a physical space to really change its, like how we feel in it. I don't know. Hey, you might want to put a book under that or something. I almost did.
Yeah,
there's a
it's
good one
the-
right there if you want to
That's
do that.
fine.
The microphone is actually a funny instrument. I laugh at. I don't watch TikTok, but I see these things come up from time to time, and people have like these miniature microphones.
Yeah.
They're like this big, and they're holding them like this.
Yeah.
And
Oh
it's
my.
just the most absurd thing. It's so fun. I find it so funny. Like first, people were using a lapel mic and just hold it like a lav and holding it here, and it's like, well, that's what the clip thing is for. But
so
okay,
you don't have to. Yeah.
But then they actually
Sure,
started
they're doing
making
that.
these miniature microphones. Like it looks like a miniature mic,
That's
but
so funny.
it's that size. And then contrast that with like one of my heroes, Nardwar the Human Serviette,
We love him.
you know,
More.
who vastly underappreciated Canadian cultural hero as far as I'm concerned. But his mic game is like so hard. He's like right in people's like face with it.
Yeah.
Like it's a great thing. You've made it when Nardwar wants to interview you.
It's true.
As far as I'm concerned, I will not have made it until Nardwar comes a calling. So
Well,
We need to make that happen.
Theory Underground will not be above ground until Nardwar is putting his microphone in our faces.
Right?
That's the.
yeah. And now I'm not a hip hop artist. I'm a former punk rocker. He used to do a lot of punk stuff. He interviewed Black Flag. What's his name there? We were talking about
Rollins.
Thank you, Henry Rollins, who most unfortunately did not get what he was up to, but that's okay.
Oh, you didn't get it?
No,
Oh,
no,
no.
it's really bad. I thought he was going to punch out Nardwar, but it's okay. Yeah, Nardwar, who's like one of the most Canadian people out there, He's so unreasonably proud. He seizes on any small Canadian claim to fame with regard to hip hop. You know, like there are certain the Apache break was actually produced in Canada in Vancouver, and he tries to get rappers to confirm this at any given opportunity. It's really funny. But, you know, Marshall McLuhan is also a fairly large Canadian claim to fame, although Canadians don't generally like to claim him as their own, which is kind of funny. But, you know, there's hope. Maybe someday Nardwuar will get interested.
That would require being literate, man, and they are not, and that's McLuhan's point, right? And so he's kind of predicting the end of the literate man and the rise of the oral.
Exactly.
I guess. Which, well, actually, I was gonna actually ask a question about that, but now I want to set that aside. So remind you all, like, just there's a feature on Zoom where you go to reactions, click on that, and then there's like an arrow up. You can if you just click on reactions, you can click raise hand. So
you can even raise your hand, and the camera senses it now and raises the hand reaction for you.
Wait,
have you noticed that?
Yeah, I haven't noticed that yet.
Oh, it freaked me out the other day when I like put my hand up and like it raised the hand reaction. I'm like, whoa, that's kind of freaky.
It's not doing it for them. I don't know.
I wonder if we have to like
change the setting. Do it so.
Maybe I'm just messing.
Well, let me just close out one thing that I was saying though, which was that the space, the physical space. I figured out a long time ago, just messing around with podcasts, that when you set up an actual microphone, like this setup, I've been using this setup for years. We've got an audio assembly to 2 microphones, and it goes into the computer. It's not that fancy, but it's a few $100s. And you're holding the one mic that is mobile. Other people can get it. And I've got the stationary mic. And that can serve a lot of functions. But when you set that up, it's the opposite of there's a phone on the table. Now the conversation doesn't go as deep. As soon as you actually equip a space with the recording and or live dynamic, and then you actually introduce it, it's like, this is not a normal space anymore. It's like we've actually kind of created the public here. Like we've kind of made the public here, even if it's just recorded, because ostensibly you're going to do something with that in the future, and then other people will be listening in, and so it's like, oh, we're just hanging out. It's just 2 or 3 or 5 of us hanging out. And we're talking and we're having great conversations. But then, okay, hold on. Let's put a little foresight into this. We got to set it up, run the mics, blah, blah, blah. Now it's a different kind of space. And it changes the dynamic in a really interesting way. And so it's kind of like, I don't know what it is doing as far as like the medium goes, but it's obviously different than just being there. And so...
I have a comment / question. The question is unrelated to the comment. I think I had said this when we had our meeting before the critical media theory course with Andrew, but I appreciate that your focus is not so much in the theory and that it is in like, we need to get this noticed by governments and like institutional changes. So I first just want to like say I really appreciate what you do here with the McLuhan Institute and your own work. My question for you that is completely unrelated, I want to know, for those, maybe you've ever seen the McLuhan Institute logo over here is an M with an upside down bird, and I want to know what the meaning of that is, if we could.
Definitely. In fact, I love to talk about it. Well, if you could, is there a view of it? No, there's not a view of it
here.
Right now.
I can.
For the Zoom side people, and we'll show you all what's actually in front of the speakers.
Well, there you go. So, this is a funny thing. When I was trying to think of a visual identity for the McLuhan Institute, Marshall McLuhan grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Okay.
Midwestern Canadian province. Winnipeg is a bit of a dusty town at the moment, but it was a rail hub, and it used to be like one of the top cities in North America. It was really happening. it's a river hub too, which was more important before rail. But Marshall, for whatever reason, called himself a Winnipigeon. And as far as I know, this is not a thing. People do not generally call themselves Winnipigeons who are from Winnipeg. But Marshall did, for reasons I do not know. However, I always loved that because I kind of love pigeons. I identify with pigeons. Pigeons to me are like street doves. They're like,
They are.
Yeah.
They're friends.
Oh, they are very much. Yeah, I dig them. I knew this guy who, as a random side hustle, when people were having funerals or weddings and they wanted to release doves, they called him up, and he showed up with his cage of birds. And you'd think, wow, that's an incredible thing to do, and man, it must be expensive. How do you get all those doves? Well, they're actually white pigeons. They're homing pigeons. And that look like doves. And so he would drive the pigeons over, and at the moment he'd let them go, and they all fly away, and they go back to their roost. And he can gather them up and bring them to the next place.
Nice.
Right? So when you're seeing doves released at an event, they're not doves. They're actually pigeons in disguise. And I love that. But anyway, back to the story. So I love this idea of Winnipigeon, and I designed this logo with a pigeon sitting on top of a W for Winnipeg as the Winnipigeon logo. Then for the McLuhan Institute, it's a pigeon hanging from an M, and I went, we have this expression in English, flipping the bird, right? So I kind of flipped the bird, and now it's a pigeon hanging from M for McLuhan or media or whatever else, and it's just to show the playfulness, and more playfulness than irreverence. And it's kind of, my punk rock roots as well, where I used to spend a lot of time flipping the bird at people, visually or sonically. So yeah, that's the logo.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
I never actually knew all of that. I think I knew the Winnipigeon part because it rings a bell. But yeah, pigeons get a bad rep. People hate them, but they're friends. They were domesticated by us in the first place.
They're not seagulls.
Yeah, people should just be grateful they're not seagulls.
Right?
Yeah. Anne has had to step out of the space here to run and go get water. But Christopher is someone who's in the critical media theory cohort. And I thought maybe it would be cool if for a moment you at least say hi, and you don't have to ask a question for everybody, but if you have one, absolutely. Or, just anything you were thinking about in relation to the talks today.
Hello, now I'm thinking about pigeons, but nice to meet you. I missed some of the lecture because I had physical therapy, so if my question was addressed already, just assume I wasn't here. But I would say, what other thinkers would you say are relevant when it comes to technology and the media and ways to, in the real time, make change, whether it's just yourself or large scale?
Yeah,
that's a
just an easy question.
That's a good question. I think when people do it, it's inadvertent. So I think of writers and musicians especially, as people in the public sphere who are encouraging you to do different by actually making stuff, going out there and doing things. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world to maybe not pick up an instrument, start a band, write poetry, write songs, whatever. It's not. It's difficult. But it's never been easier or more difficult to connect with people, right? And it's such an interesting tension between those two things. And this is something, when I made the New York City reference before, this is something that we've figured out with cities in meat space, in physical space, that we have not managed to figure out in internet architecture. Getting noticed on the internet is like pouring your glass of water into the ocean and expecting anybody to notice, right? You're just adding your voice to the billions of voices out there. And how do you find anything? Algorithms are a very poor, they're currently a very poor answer. Nobody's figured out how to really hack algorithms from a user side of things yet. I don't think. I haven't seen it. I mean, there are ways you can game algorithms to get notice on them or something, but that's not what I mean. I mean, like coming up with, a punk rock algorithm or that kind of ethos attached to hacking, that'll be an interesting development in computer culture when hackers attack algorithms. I think that's possible, interesting territory. And we've gone way beyond what you brought up as a question. But that's the fun thing about questions and answers, is we're not obligated to actually directly answer your question. People don't realize.
That's true. No, this is interesting.
No, I'm just messing around, but actually that's the fun thing about being interviewed, is that people don't realize that you are not obligated to answer the question. You can say any damn thing in response, and you can have a lot of fun with that. And when you do a lot of interviews, you start to look for ways of having fun. And that's one of the small pleasures we can get.
And the question that Christopher had asked, and I'll give you some time to think about it, but it's, what are some other thinkers on our radar for understanding media and critique? So I just wanted to say a couple of names that we had left out that are pretty essential. Virilio is somebody who's really important, who I struggle with, and I know he's more important than I've ever given him credit. And so he's someone I've been looking into on the side, but I'm not there with him yet. Like Mikey was studying him, I remember 8 years ago, and sharing quotes by him talking, and I remember being like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Why does it matter? And he's basically the theorist of speed. And so when we think about how everything's speeding up all of the time, he's thinking about that. And, he's famous for saying that when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck, which is important for kind of checking our tendency to just see everything as progress all the way. It's like, yeah, but what are the externalities of that progress? Environmental, exploitative, whatever, etc. But he also brings an interesting perspective to speed and theorizing it, because he is thinking about how the reason that things speed up, it does have something to do with military research and the actual fact that we are on the other side of the first 2 world wars, and there could be a third one, and the development of of military might and its sophistication comes along with this drive to ever increase speed. And of course, we also think when it comes to speed, Amazon loses $36 million for every 0.0001 second it takes for the website to load. The longer it takes the website to load, the more people they lose. And so when we're like, well, why do we need a new phone every year? Why do we need 5G? Why does it always faster? And then our phones aren't actually faster. And it's like, well, this is one of those things where this increase in power and speed we get with the modern medium that McLuhan was keen on, its main driver is, on the one side, companies like Amazon, and on the other side, the actual military industrial complex. And so obviously that's the people who are pushing for that and that have harnessed all technological development towards these ends they've got bigger things to worry about than our anxieties. They've got bigger things to worry about than that. So that's just the thing that I'm thinking about.
This is why I find it so bizarre, this accelerationist movement.
Yeah.
Because it seems like the exact opposite thing we should be doing. Like, why hasten our doom? That makes zero sense to me. This is why my escape strategies are all about slowing things down. Because how else can you expect to survive? It's a bizarre thing, but the speed is actually a mix. It's not all doom. Marshall acknowledges that he couldn't have done what he did in any other time, just because when change happens really slow, you don't notice it. And for most of human history, change happens slowly. It's only in the last few centuries that's been different. When things happen slowly, you can adjust to them. When they happen quickly, you can't adjust. You can only react. And Marshall was fond of quoting Bertrand Russell, who said, if they only raised the temperature of the bathwater by 0.5 degree every hour, you wouldn't know when to scream.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Like the frog in the...
This is right.
Exactly.
Everyone has that saying about the frog,
slowly.
right?
So the advantage of our time is things happen so quickly, we can't adjust. We have an opportunity to notice it for the first time.
And that's a condition of freedom. That's a condition of freedom. Right.
Sure. So, but that's the other point, and this is my point about theory and practice, is that it's one thing to say we have a chance to do something about it. It's another thing to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, doing things about it. So, win.
And Christopher, I know you're reading him. The other answer is obviously Byung-Chul Han.
That's who I was thinking too,
Yeah. Who we will be reading in 2 months, basically. And so, and then I think we'll also read him on the final month. His Psychopolitics, his In the Swarm, his The Scent of Time, like, these are absolutely essential. Not just for CMT, but also as far as like popular philosophers goes, I think the work he does is some of the most cutting edge, and that he is in dialogue with most of the thinkers I am. And so I get a lot of inspiration from him. And he, like Sloterdijk or Žižek, does not turn to philosophy departments and then face them when he talks. He turns to artists and people who are just trying to think. And but he's a Korean German, or I don't really know how to say that, but I think he's from Korea and he lives in Germany, and most of the philosophy he's based in is French and German, but he takes inspiration from Zen and like the art of the haiku, and he talks about that, and you see it in his writing style. His is like extremely condensed, succinct, and clear, but it can also be seductively clear in a bad way, where you actually underestimate him and you read too fast and you don't realize he's packed so much into every page that I do think a lot of people underestimate Byung-Chul Han.
No one makes that mistake with Marshall McLuhan.
No, absolutely not.
It's impossible to read fast.
The last thing I have before I'll ask you all to say your final thoughts is, and then we'll close this thing out, is that I did not realize when you said that the Wi-Fi here is TMI, that's the acronym or initials of the McLuhan Institute.
Really?
I was thinking too much information.
Yeah.
And so, and then when you said it during your talk, I was like, duh. But then I was like, because I had thought, oh, that's clever. The internet is too much information. So it's like, here's the Wi-Fi, access the internet with this. TMI. Makes sense. But then it also is just in line with the wordplay we've already been doing today. I was thinking about how it's a nice coincidence because without media theory, the information age is just TMI. Because we don't know what to do with or how to sift through or live with all of that information. And so that's why you're important. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and the other part of it, like the Wi-Fi password, because TMI, the medium is.
That's what I was saying. I was going to expose your password, but you did it. So.
Hey, that's fine. If you want to, like I said to you guys, if you're going to come and hack this network, I see you.
Yeah,
Like,
the window.
I'm literally between farms here. So you'll stand out unless you are disguised as a cow. And even then, I'll probably see you. Because I know what a cow looks like. But I would love if somebody showed up in a cow costume trying to hack my very, very secure network over here. Honestly. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Take that.
What about our audience member? Do you have any comments, Eamon?
As our token Trotskyist, I had just a couple things
Okay.
I had noted. Dave, when you were talking about base and superstructure in relation to Marx, I kind of related to that. Like when you ask Marxists the question about power and of the ruling class, ideology and the superstructure, they'll all acknowledge that the superstructure can affect the base. The issue is they don't do anything about it. They don't bother with any rigorous analysis of the technologies of media and bourgeois ideology, how they're deployed and how they shape and reshape society. They'll produce biting analysis of postmodernism, identity politics, Stalinism, Austrian economics, etc. But never their method of deployment, and there's no media critique there. It's just the thought I had there, which I thought was odd. Like if you say, "Oh, I'm reading Gramsci" or something, they'll look a little side-eyed at you. They won't tell you not to read it, but they'll be like, focus on your Lenin and Trotsky and Marx. Because to them it's kind of fluff. It's not. We got newspapers for that. And then you were Andrew. You were mentioning hangovers from the past, and that triggered my Trotskyism. Because I don't know if it was Trotsky or Marx who said that things can long outlast their historical purpose, and things can limp along. Until conditions produce a crisis sufficient to sweep away the old order, replace it with a fresh order at a higher level. Stone tablets, cave paintings, newspapers, VHS, these are all things that have been kind of supplanted. Some are still in use, sort of. Others are just completely gone. We don't need them at all anymore. And capitalism would be the main example of that. Served a progressive role in the 19th century, but then its rotting senility now, its ability to produce social progress has long ago expired. Those are just my thoughts on.
Here's the thing. I kind of forgot you're a contributor in the volume Underground Theory. And it's because we added him very last minute, because he gave this awesome lecture that we were like, man, it'd be so cool to have that in the volume. If you just give it, because he already typed it out, fluff it up slightly to make it a little bit more like a chapter, and we'll actually add it. And so we got him in last minute, and so he's not even in the early drafts, like the draft we have here on the table, not in there. But maybe just tell people the title and kind of what you did there, and your video will go up here in the next couple of days, and they'll be able to check it out on the Theory Underground channel. Yeah, so I wrote an article. No, I wrote a presentation basically on what did I call it? A letter. The
Solitarius.
Yeah, take the mic. Yeah, and nose it off the topper.
The Solitarius letter to soft-bodied theory dorks.
Yeah,
right. Because I'm a personal trainer, and that's and I own a gym. So I wrote. That was the subtitle or the title.
That was the title, yeah.
And the subtitle is the Dialectics of Fitness. And so
Nice.
Yeah, so I wrote a paper, an article on like how to think about fitness from a kind of a Marxist or dialectical perspective.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
I mean, that's good, and I don't even need to read the article. That's
Yeah. I'm sold.
Yeah. How to think about your health and fitness. Yeah.
So make sure to order a copy of Underground Theory, and if you ever get it in the mail, then I say that because he still hasn't received his, but Christopher keeps getting everything he orders. So I think it's just a fluke of the system. Sometimes they run out of copies, and then they have to reprint them, and that takes a while. But we'll let Anne close this thing out.
Yeah. My closing thoughts here. So I don't know, Andrew, if you know about this, but we had shared with one of the contributors of the author or of the book a cover of our draft cover of the book. He said, "Oh, can I post this on Twitter to show people about the book?" And we said, "Sure." And so he posted it like, "Oh, Underground Theory coming out soon." And this tweet got like a lot of people because some of the names on there are considered controversial, or we had the name Underground Theory and then had like Marshall McLuhan and Slavoj Žižek, and they're like, these aren't underground. And yeah, a couple people going, "Oh wow, Underground Theory from Slavoj Žižek, a top professor, Tom McGowan, and a dead guy, Marshall McLuhan." Like, and so people,
Yeah.
I'm like shocked that that was people's reaction versus, wait, Marshall McLuhan, he hasn't been around for a while. There's a new piece on there. And so
He is literally underground.
He is literally underground.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say, like, I'm really excited to have that piece in there. I think all the other people kind of in the Underground Theory community are actually like, what is wrong with you, Twitter people? Like, this is a big deal. And so thank you for helping make that happen. Yeah, get your copy of Underground Theory. Check out this letter. It is unique because we actually pasted in screenshots of the original, like, typewritten text, so to kind of preserve the historical importance of it and just to see it for what it is. And so
you can like see his little corrections.
You can see his little corrections. It's super cool, and yeah, only available in Underground Theory. Check it out. Check it out.
Yeah, that's right. So go to https://theory-underground.com/store, and you can get Underground Theory and my book Timenergy, which I was sitting there and I kept thinking, oh, I had this one thread that I was talking about and then I lost it and I never actually tied that up, and I had this other thread and I never fit. Because after I finished talking, I was like, wow, yeah, I brought up Timenergy and then I never really explained that. Or I brought up the time-lapse thing and I never really explained that. I explain it elsewhere. You all know what it's about. If you don't know what it's about, you eventually will get the memo.
Figure it out.
After everyone's doing it, you'll know.
Yeah.
But no, the Timenergy thing, it's important. It ties into critical media theory. And it is a way of kind of bringing it back to something that Anne had actually said, which was that I had not been saying that Theory Underground is a critical media theory experiment until we were doing this cohort. But the subtitle of my first book, Waypoint, which came out in 2020 or 2021, I think it was written over 2019 to 2020, and then it was published 2021. But the subtitle is Timenergy, Culture War, and Critical Media Theory.
That's
and the
right.
reason critical media theory is in the subtitle is because I knew even then that that's one of my main threads. And the chapter where I deal with this idea of cancel culture and I try to do a material analysis of it, it's all just critical media theory. It's just about people's attention spans and how they react to things now, and how the medium structures things. And so this idea that there are bad dynamics that do bad things to me and to people I love and that I don't like, that's been around. CMT's been around. But you're right, until the cohort, I'd never really formulated it as like, this is a CMT experiment. But I have actual, the idea of a website that does things that no existing websites do, that I think any and every independent academic type of project will probably want to incorporate most or at least many of the elements of. Thinking of that in terms of a CMT experiment does go back to when I was living in Coeur d'Alene back in, like, that was the winter of 2019, right before I moved to Hawaii. Yeah. So it is Timenergy and CMT, man. That's where it's at. And so thank you for having us here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you we're about to go meet your family. I think they're all coming over here. And so, yeah, time's up. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into this.
Thank you. We'll see y'all next time.
Thank you for having us. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cool.
Bye. End meeting for all.
That'd be a great book title.
End meaning for all.
End meeting for all.
And
Yeah.
meaning for all.
I think that's hilarious that Marshall McLuhan is actually the underground theorist
He
in this
is.
book because he's literally underground.
That
It's the most
is, yeah.
underground.
No, we
That's
were
pretty
just like, we're all like, guys, it's Marshall McLuhan, like a unseen.
Oh, that's why
Jeez.
they saw the kitty.
Oh.